men, women, and young children of all kinds. Welcome. I'm Tebo. I am your treasurer of state. Once fellow soldier like the rest of you. Now, I know all of you are wondering, why are we standing here underneath a platform? And the reason is, we are waiting for our dearest president to arrive, to give us the speech of our lives. But for now, enjoy my mini speech while we wait. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you were drafted into the general's army? Majority of you. Okay, Tebo said as he looked across the zillions of faces. Here he stood atop the podium, watching as the hundreds of civilians kneeled down and on one knee in front of the podium while he talked. He didn't particularly have this speech scripted. He wouldn't be able to read it, and it would be a hot mess. So he just had to pull from memory. One of the things that he and Tommy had discussed prior to him getting up on the stage. Do you remember, Tebo asked, taking a breath as he looked across the swaths of people before continuing on, that there was a time when you were asked as a wee lad, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most of us, if not all of us, had said something along the lines of, I want to be a farmer, or I want to be a great explorer, or I want to be the best fighter ever. I want to hunt down all the mobs. Me, I wanted to be a beekeeper. I wanted to have all the bees in the world. I wanted to have the largest hive. Tebo chuckled to himself as he shifted back and forth on his feet. He's looking nervously off to his left. Wilbur had yet to arrive, and it was honestly getting harder to stifle the nerves of being up on a stage. And then you were asked again, right before the draft, right? 2-3 years before the draft, you were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And at that time, most of us had said, I want to be a great fighter. I want to be a warrior, or I wanted to be a nurse and provide for those injured soldiers. I wanted to make food for my armies. I wanted freedom. That's what most of us said, right? Because we lived in the embassy. At the time, this was all embassy land. And we didn't want that anymore. Our parents didn't want that. And so, by the time we are now, I'm going to ask you again, what do you want to be? Now, most of you are like, what do you mean? I'm a soldier. Or what do you mean? I'm a nurse. Or what do you mean? I provide food for the army. But that's not what General Soot ever wanted. General Soot didn't want people being forced to work for him. He never wanted that. He wanted freedom. He wanted freedom, just like all of you fine folk I see before me. Tebo's voice stretched across the entirety of the crowd, sending a hush of whispers. And so I'm here to tell you that the life we've been leading is not something that we want, right? We didn't want to be the soldier boy. We didn't want to be the in-training nurse. We didn't want any of that. We wanted a home. We wanted freedom, and we wanted to live. if the way we want to. And so that's what we want, right? That's everything we... Tubbo turned as he heard silent footsteps. There stood the general and his president and the man who raised him, Wilbur. Sorry, he shook himself. Sorry, I don't mean to cut off my great speech, but our president, your former general, has arrived. Wilbur walked onto the stage as Tubbo took a step back. He watched as the man took a step forward and tapped the mic. The mic let out a slow hum across the crowd. He formed a fist and coughed into the hand. Tubbo shifted uncomfortably as his general placed a hand behind his back. Hello, he spoke, his voice very loud and boisterous like that of Tommy whenever he wanted to be. It's me, your general, and your now president, Wilbur Soot. I wanted to firstly thank my treasurer, Tubbo, for all the greatness that he put into that speech. Because he's right. We want freedom. And I want freedom for you, the people. I do not want you, the people, to be forced to be under my rule. That is not who I want to be. Tubbo watched as Wilbur huffed. Turning back to face him with a shy, nice smile. Anyways, back to that. And again, thank you, Tubbo, for that amazing speech and all that you bring to the table. Tubbo dipped his head and smiling widely, at Wilbur's praise. Now, Tubbo watched as Wilbur continued. I don't want us to turn into another embassy. That's not what L'Manberg's for, the man continued. L'Manberg is for the people. It's for freedom and for liberty and for the pursuit of victory. You all know the national anthem by now, the one that my beloved friend, Nikki. Where is she? He looked across the crowd. Tubbo watched as he pointed to a young woman in blonde and a light blue trench coat. She stood up, smiling brightly. Tubbo watched as the man nodded. She was the one. Now look at her, people. Look at her, and I want you to thank her. She's the reason that you have a flag. She's the reason that you have an anthem. I may have written it, and I may have perfected it, but she was the one who designed our flag, the one who suggested an anthem. So please, give her a big round of applause. Tubbo smiled as a chorus of applause filled the entirety of the outstretched lands. Tubbo followed suit, looking over to Tommy, who was also clapping, smiling very childishly. Now, the reason that L'Manberg was created was obviously for freedom and from the embassy and for the people. But my personal goals were never that other than freedom. All my life, I've been confined to one thing. I've been confined to a caretaker, a general, a brother, a father, a husband. I've had all these labels, and now I even have president. But that's not what I want. I want to be me. I want to be Wilbur Soot. I don't want to be anything other than Wilbur Soot. I may be your president, he continued, pausing, looking across the hushed crowd. Tubbo smiled as he watched Wilbur shift back and forth. The man was clearly nervous, but had a lot of courage. He had to practice, after all, to speak in front of large groups in order to be general in the first place. But I want you to know that you can come up to me anytime and call me Wilbur, not Mr. President or President Soot. I want to be known as Wilbur. And I'm sure the rest of you would like to be known as other than a ranking or a job or sir or madam. I'm sure all of you want to be called by your names. And I'm sure all of you want to go back to your ordinary lives of being farmers, of being men and women of the village, of being bakers, of being nurses just for the good of health, of being contributors to our great country, to be in construction workers for those houses that need to be built. I'm sure all of you want to return to that. And now here's your chance. I want all of you to say this with me. All of you. Tubbo watched as Wilbur turned back to face him. All of you, he said. Tubbo nodded as he stepped up, following in Tommy's footsteps, as well as the great leader's size. I, man or women of the country of Lamamburg, Wilbur started, and the rest copied, including Tubbo, are our own person, Wilbur continued, looking over the hushed crowd as he watched as the rest of them continued on. That we are free, and we are not confined to our roles as one thing. Tubbo smiled and nodded, along with Tommy, as he watched his general continue his speech. And that we are people. We are not objects. We are not something that somebody can control. We are free, and we have our own free will. Wilbur continued. Everyone also repeated. He huffed. All right. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say to the rest of you. You're all dismissed. Go back to living your ordinary lives as I would. And well. Thank you. Tubbo smiled. As Wilbur got off the stage, he shuffled forward and tapped the mic to gain everyone's attention. Everyone fell silent as he stood up. Thank you to our great president, Wilbur Soot, he commented, smiling as everyone clapped and he stepped off. Thank you, he called again.